All right, we are back in the Compass Point Institute.
Indeed. Well, great to be back. So today we're diving into something that might hit a little bit uncomfortably close to home, especially with individuals that have ADHD. We're talking about that dance of hyperfocus and perfectionism, but not the humble brag kind that you mentioned in job interviews. So I'm talking about that type that steals your life just one excellent hour at a time, whether it's the hyperfocus holes that you find yourself in or just the downstream effects. That's kind of what we're focusing on today. I think also looking back for some individuals, perfectionistic tendencies might have been a survival strategy that helped them in earlier years, age 8, 10, 12, to kind of help sit there and reduce impairment related to executive functioning challenges, but is now, at the age of 40, holding you hostage and just draining you 1 hour at a time.
In my journey of life, I was reinforced into patterns. I think, what's the drive? What's fueling the drive? And that's a really mysterious thing, especially, again, I think you say 40. Well, for me, I was probably like 38, so not much closer. And I think there's only reasonably so much time that we have as an adult. I've talked to people in their 20s, and I'm always happy for them. But it's going to be hard to see outside yourself through the passage of time to really look back and say, hey, wait a minute, what was going on? But with perfectionism, the interesting thing from my point of view is we talked about hyperfocus. I was ironically editing the videos that are on the YouTube channel now, and I was in hyperfocus. I was editing videos about hyperfocus while in hyperfocus. Imagine my surprise. I could feel it. I was like wanting something at the end of it all, but that something actually was in spite of the world. And really, that's how my creativity and perfectionism works. It's like this personal sense of satisfaction that I will actually sabotage myself in order to get it. But you're talking about something a little different,
A little
right?
bit different. I think you raise a good point. I think everybody's experiences are unique, and it just kind of manifests in different ways. We know the data supports that about 30% or so of people with ADHD develop OCD-like behaviors. To clarify, not OCD, but behaviors that are in that sort of more compulsive, obsessive bucket. There are a fair amount of individuals that have OCPD and ADHD. Swedish studies have shown us that if you have ADHD, your first degree relatives are significantly more likely to have OCD. There's definitely a dance between the two of them. For individuals that really have more of those challenges with OCPD-like behaviors, that's when that perfectionism, I think what you're kind of talking about, gets to a point where it is really pathological. We've talked about the trap of hyperfocus before and kind of the resulting cycles about that. Just picture like a child, like 8, 10 years old or so, losing everything, forgetting everything, they can't sit still. But then they kind of discover, like, hey, if I'm looking at my backpack 47 different times, if I'm creating these lists and these structures, oh, wait, teacher's not yelling at me, my parents aren't getting mad at me, oh, I'm doing a little bit better in school. And for some people, I think that drives those perfectionistic tendencies even further, because they're a way to mitigate those ADHD-related executive functioning symptoms. It's not necessarily a better situation, it's just swapping one issue out for another. For those individuals and for a lot of other, maybe not as extreme cases, that perfectionism becomes a survival strategy. I think it's an important thing to kind of look at really holistically here. In some ways, those individuals are able to do better in school. And I mean, academically, grade-wise. Not necessarily holistically big picture, because that's not a sustainable way to live your life. But on paper, you might see high academic success. Maybe that's also fueled by pressures from parents or other things that are going on. But when you kind of see that play out for, another decade, that perfectionism becomes a prison. You're just trapped into that cycle, and it's a really challenging and dark place to be thrust in. Your perfectionism isn't necessarily character strength. It's your ADHD brain's armor. The biggest issue is the amount of time that they spend on these different tasks. And if you are that type of person that has those perfectionistic tendencies, you're spending 10 hours on different things that just could have taken an hour or so. And had you just spent an hour and maybe got 85, 90% as good of output, you'd have all that extra time to spend on wellness, on family, on other things. Especially when individuals get older, there are large gaps in their life because they're still dedicating all these time to tasks that should honestly take way, way less than they are. And then you've got family stressors, you've got other things coming in it, and they just don't have the ability to kind of switch to that and, devote and allocate appropriate time.
With ADHD, when you're treating it as well as living with it, whatever, it's like your brain's now reliably online. So what does that mean? That's the interesting thing, person to person. Okay, now what? What have we been through? What are we going through, And all these patterns. When we think of survival, we're thinking about a period of time in our lives where if we did something that affected us externally, meaning it made us able to be reliant upon people or situations or groups, if we were able to be dependent because of something that we did, that's a win. So we're going to do what works. And at a period of time in our lives, childhood or adolescence, any time before adulthood, that's the win. But it's jarring when we go from doing things one way to now we're an adult and we're really going to do best to say, what am I feeling? How do I go about in the world based upon what we're experiencing? If we're reacting and responding to out of control situations and circumstances, how are we going to know what we're feeling? So this is the stuff we have to work through. And ADHD treatment, it can be one of the many things that breaks down the walls. But nonetheless, it's finding a different operating system. We've outgrown the old way of doing things. So how do we find the new way of doing things? And just to be real, James being real brave right now, you're working through it, I can tell. And I know this because I've worked through it too. If there's mental health clinicians listening to this, I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day. Right now, there's a lot of people that are struggling, but there's a lot of people that want to help, like James and I and other therapists out there, if you're listening, other clinicians. Sometimes people can really forget that we're people too, and we have our own sort of stuff to work through. But the good news is, if we are able to do that, we're going to be so much better at helping other people because we've walked the walk. Am I right?
No, I completely agree on that. I think that's an important part to really look at the day to day with these patients. Let's break down what's happening. You're doing a patient note. How long did it take? Oh, it took you 2 hours. Should have taken you 20 minutes. Oh, breakfast preparation for your family. It had to be something elaborate. Oh, you spent 45 minutes on that. Could have probably done it in 10. An email response, which is a low level, simple email. You spend 30 minutes on it instead of 5. And looking at that, kind of extrapolating that over the week, it's like, wow, that's 9 hours over the course of a week. Is that how you want your children to remember you? Celebrate B+ work. Fear is going to demand an A+ or death. There is no middle ground. There isn't good enough is good enough. They're not able to sit there and get to that point where they can reconcile that.
My best vantage point, learning to deal with my toxic mother, working toward healing trauma that I've been through, and working with my patients, realizing that my mother has narcissistic personality disorder and going no contact, that change in my life was so dramatic that I said, wow, it just gave me this huge vantage point of looking at my patients. Maybe other people are going through something similar. We have a will to live. We're going to act out of that will. We're going to do things that are repeatable and predictable, these behaviors. And if they have an outcome outside of us that affect other people, that's really, really a good thing. So ultimately, I think that's what the cool part about this stuff as an adult now is that when we peel back and look at ourselves and be real about what we're holding and what our emotions are telling us, then we can say, okay, there's a different way of doing things. That's the part that takes a minute. We have to unpack that, and no one has the same sort of rate. But on the other side of it is the person that we knew all along. The interesting thing about my path was if there was this standard, it was like, sure, crickets, chirp, 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 chirp. So I learned to just kind of focus on myself. I realized no one really cares. In that is another thing for perfectionism. I didn't realize in my sort of solitude and in my sort of creative endeavors, there was this sort of sadness there. Being able to sit with that and name it, to me, is something that with medication, ADHD medication, that can be the tipping point where maybe the brain's online more, but not always.
No, I think that's a really powerful part to put in here. Talking about being on a good medication regimen, it's like, I think that allows you to have less armor walking through life. Like you are able to kind of be a little bit more vulnerable, and I think able to, get to a point where, okay, B+ work that I finished today is better than A+ work that doesn't get finished ever.
Those are the hurdles, the real life hurdles in the moment that we face. When are we going to be challenged? We're social creatures, so we're going to be operating out of a place of automatic, instantaneous interactions bouncing off each other. And if your medication's not on board, then you have no frontal lobe. So with the frontal lobe, we might have just a little bit more ability to just stop and say what's going on here instead of just flying into action. And it could be that, wait a minute, I feel really, really stressed out. So many people say, I just started my medication, but I'm really stressed out. It's like, well, what did you do before? It's like, oh, I punched a hole in the wall. I threw something across the room. But the emotional center, if we can start there and say, this is what I feel, I think that's a powerful first step.
No, extremely well said. Completely agree with that. I liked hearing just like putting the brakes on things and sitting with that discomfort and the anxiety and the stress, and then, reflecting on it. Where is that coming from? Why am I feeling that? How do you unpeel that dance of trauma and ADHD and all of the other things that are co-occurring? And I think that that is, like you said, a great first step to really to begin that process.
In regards to perfectionism, and you mentioned OCD, I'm really glad you did. The way I conceptualize obsessive compulsive disorder is very much cognitive. So something our mind does in response to the nervous system is think. You ever seen MacGyver or Walter White in Breaking Bad? He got that
Mm-hmm.
survival mode in and bang, it was great, right? So that's him using his mind under pressure. But the problem is that our mind is racing because we're not
Mm-hmm.
calm in the way we used to be. There's now a better way of doing things, and our body knows it. So if we realize and identify we're triggered, we might be able to say, not the time to think. Because if we are thinking, then we're not thinking clearly. So this is why we say, come to your senses, because you're not thinking clearly. It's because our nervous system is focused on survival. So we have a limited view. It's right here, and we can't see outside of ourselves. I think it was like 2014. My wife and I were coming back from Florida. And I had a panic attack on the airplane.
Ugh.
Just totally lost my mind. And, after it was over, it was really during takeoff. It leveled out and it was all gone, and just shame
Oh,
came
cheapers.
in. But it's just amazing how like our emotions, how we experience them, can shift and change. But if we can catch ourselves and do something different, and say, not the time right now, or what am I holding is a good one. In having those strategies, let me go in the other room, let me write something down. But there are times when it won't work. Our mind just wants to stay on, especially if you have that hyper focus and you have solved problems. There's a problem that we may have actually solved in our mind as a child. That problem that was unsolvable, we may have solved in our mind, if you can think about that. So when we're coming from that perspective, it's like, why doesn't it work? I've talked with patients, usually in technical jobs, like, I need to solve this problem. If we're never able to draw attention to, what do I feel? Oh, I feel my feet on the floor. I breathe in and out, activate the peripheral nervous system. If we're not able to do that, the mind's just going to keep going, because the solution is not outside of ourselves. So on we go and on we go and on we go. That's kind of the way I view OCD, being informed
Mm-hmm.
by this work, working with folks, whether it's autism or people that just cannot
Mm-hmm.
turn their mind off.
No, that gets me thinking too. I kind of came up with this little phrase, and I was thinking more externally about systems, but I think hearing your thoughts on internally all of this, I think it's a great phrase that kind of catches all of it. And present beats perfect every single time. So I think that that works both
Oh,
externally when
yeah.
we're talking about, being with people that you care about and being present and not just on these tasks of A+ necessity. But I think you're right too. I think being internally present for yourself is extraordinarily powerful. And I
hmm
think did a great job summing that up. And I think it's important, just be present. You don't have to be perfect.
We're never going to go back to our former selves and say, you're all fixed, and be able to do that. But what we're able to do is within ourselves realize what we didn't get. There's a really ironic duality here. So it's like this acceptance piece and understanding we have survived. So therefore, as we walk in to the office meeting or walk into the party where you don't know people and you feel uncomfortable, we might have different ways of doing things in the past, but it's not until we walk in and we experience it and we get that feedback that we understand how we feel. As we get that compass centered, you set the compass right here and you allow it to sort of point you in the direction. And what's the direction? It starts with how you feel. And then from there, we have to learn how to navigate the world based upon that. But it's taking stock of what we're bringing to the party. Because if we do care about other people, then we want to make sure that we can do the best
Exactly.
job. We want to make sure we can live up to these promises. Does
No,
that make sense?
hit the nail on the head. And I think that kind of leads me to my final concluding thought. I think we've done a really good job kind of in summation, A+.
A
So
plus.
yeah, A+ will be kind of integrated into that. So I think,
Oh, let's say B plus.
yes, I think, well, they'll both be part of this. So I think just hearing this, like the bravest thing that an ADHD adult can do, and especially a person that might be more subject to those perfectionistic traits and such. So
Mm-hmm.
accepting the B+ work in 1 hour is going to be far more ideal than A++ work that you've spent 10 hours on. While that perfectionism might have saved you in third grade, eighth grade, maybe even in college, it's robbing your child, effectively just sabotaging your ability to be present. I think it's important. It's time to retire your armor. Your 8-year-old self is safe now, and those strategies that were important then to kind of mitigate it are actually hang them up. I think there's other ways to sit there and go about things at this juncture that are going to let you find that presence and find that balance in life and sustainability.
Yeah, I wonder if there's other mental health clinicians out there listening right now. I'd love to hear from you. Compass Point Institute YouTube channel. Going to work on the call to action. But nonetheless, a lot of my patients are higher academic positions or maybe success, whatever society tells us you should be happy. And that's the really interesting irony. All that glitters isn't gold. But if we're able to heal, this survival, it can actually do wonderful things. And I think when we are able to reduce the negative impact, then we can see, oh, okay, all the cool things, it's like all the good things about our life story. We wouldn't have it any other way. I think that's a really interesting uniformity among everyone. Once we heal, we're like, well, we wouldn't want it any other way because we have a new sort of set of eyes. My high school GPA was, I think, 1.5 or something. I just pretty much barely graduated. Then finally, in my early 20s, finding this field and really getting into that. For me, it was like, well, at this point, there's nothing left to lose. But in that, when are you going to actually say to yourself, what achievement, what milestone, what thing outside of yourself is going to say, oh, you did it? What is that all about? Because sitting here at my desk at my private practice, having an advanced degree, that was when it hit me. Like, uh-oh, I don't think it's going to be this thing. I don't think it's going to be this milestone. I don't think it's going to be this weekend. I don't think it's going to be this thing.
It's here right now.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's here now. No, I think that's really great place to end it. I think it's important.
Awesome.
Once you actually meet that milestone, if you're not able to sit there, recognize, enjoy, and give yourself credit and grace for getting there, that's an indicator that, there's probably work to be done.
This is the Compass Point Institute. Check us out on YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and just come along for the ride. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.